What's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a Counter Fairy deck profile. So I'm really excited to do some for you guys because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Izzy. And this deck is an extremely powerful deck that can counter any play that your opponent throws at you because we usually have an answer to them with all of our awesome counter traps. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Like getting your name description in a single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron. And definitely give Izzy some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one guys. So first off, we're playing 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. This card is definitely a 3-of in the deck because every time we activate a counter trap, we actually get to draw a card, which is an amazing effect to help us dig into the deck for more counter traps to stop our opponent. We then play 3 copies of Guiding Ariadne. This card is definitely a 3-of as well in the deck for its pendulum effect that you can actually activate your counter traps without having to pay life points or discarding cards, which is amazing to be able to play this card in your pendulum zone so you can activate your solemn cards for free. We then play a single copy of Power Angel Valkyra. This card is really good just as a 1-of in the deck because if you negate the activation of a spell trap or monster effect, you get to add a light fairy monster from your deck to your hand, which is a great ability to search out the exact card that we need. We then play a single copy of Scholar of the Sky. Scholar of the Sky is really good just as a 1-of because each time a counter trap is activated, immediately on the results, this card gains 500 attack points, and if it does and the Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you get to add a counter trap with a different name from your graveyard back to your hand, which is a really cool to be able to just add the exact card that you need. But this card can get absolutely massive on the field because as you counter cards on the field, this card is going to gain those attack points and be absolutely massive. You can play a single copy of Sage of the Sky. Sage of the Sky is great in this deck as a 1-of because each time a counter trap is activated, immediately this effect resolves, you gain 1,000 life points, and if the Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you destroy a card your opponent controls, which is a pretty cool effect. We then play a single copy of Barrier Statue of the Heavens. This card basically locks it down so both players can only special summon light, which is a really cool effect, especially in this deck because we only play light in this build and we play Ties of the Brethren. We then play a single copy of Sacred Air Knight Parashaft. This card is really good as a 1-of in the build as a big boss monster that we can actually summon off of Rebirth of Parashaft, which is a great counter trap that we can activate to be able to negate something and then summon out this card. But this card is great to be able to play in the build because if you activate a counter trap or if you negate the activation of a spell trap or monster effect, you can manage 2 other fairy monsters in your hand or your graveyard or your field and special summon this card from the grave or your hand, which is a great effect. And also this card does piercing damage, and when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you get to add a Parashaft card or a counter trap from your deck to your hand, which is a pretty cool effect, especially on this 2800 body. The reason I play so many 1-ofs in this build is because we're also playing Ties of the Brethren, so we're playing the extremely important ones at 3, which is the Bountiful Artemis and Ariadne, and then the other ones we're just playing at 1 because we want to summon them off of Ties of the Brethren. So that's it for the monsters guys. Let's get in to the spells. So for the spells, we're going to start with a single copy of Card of Demise. Card of Demise is really good as a 1-of in the deck to basically get 3 cards into our hand. As we draw until we have 3 cards in our hand, also for the rest turn, after this card resolves, your opponent takes no battle damage, and also during the end phase of this turn, you send your entire hand to the graveyard, which is not that big of a deal because we're basically just using this card to dig into the deck for more counter traps we can set to our side of the field. We then play 2 copies of the Sanctum of Parashaft. This card is great because it counts as the Sanctuary in the Sky, which is an amazing effect to make sure we're going to get those bonus effects on our monsters, and also it makes it so our fairy monsters on the field gain 300 attack and defense. And also set spells and traps cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects as well, and once per turn you can target a total of 3 fairy and/or counter traps with different names in the grave and place them on top of the deck in any order to be able to recycle your cards. We then play 3 copies of Ties of the Brethren. Ties of the Brethren is great to be able to play, so we can basically special summon out 2 more of our fairy monsters to our side of the field. As when we have one on our side of the field, we can pay 2,000 life points and then special summon out 2 more monsters from our deck to our side of the field, which is basically going to let us special summon out our monsters from the deck. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Pot of Extravagance is great to help us dig into the deck for the exact card that we need, as we really don't need the extra deck all that much, so this card is extremely helpful in the build to help us basically draw 2. We then play 3 copies of Time-Tearing Morganite. Time-Tearing Morganite is really good in this deck as a 3-of, because this card is really good to give us an additional normal summon and let us draw 2 cards instead of 1 during our normal draw phase. And since we're basically just using counter traps to stop the opponent instead of hand traps, this card is really good because we never activate monster effects in the hand in this deck, which is actually why I don't play Honest in this build. This card is really good as a 3-of in the deck, just to help us give an additional draw so we can draw into more counter traps so we can basically negate more cards against the opponent. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to start with 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. The only problem with this deck is that it does struggle in the battle phase if your opponent does put up a monster on the board that can swing through our monsters, even through the barrier statue. But this card is really good to be able to play in the deck to basically just bounce our opponent's monsters back to the hand, just in case they do summon a monster larger than our barrier statue. We can basically just activate this and bounce that card back to the hand and basically go in for the counter trap plays to stop anything else. But this card is amazing in the deck as a 3-of, basically just to deal with the battle phase. We then play 2 copies of Rebirth of Parashaft. This card is really good as a 2-of in the deck as a awesome counter trap. Then when a spell card or a trap card or a monster effect is activated, you reveal a counter trap in your hand, discard a card, and pay 1,000 life points to negate the activation to shuffle that card into the deck. Then you can special summon a Parashaft monster from your deck or your X deck, which is a great effect to instantly summon out one of our boss monsters. We then play 3 copies of Draco Utopian Aura. This card is really awesome as a 3-of in the deck just to stop your opponent's monster effects, because when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, negate the activation if you do destroy that card. Then you can apply the following effect that you can banish a monster from your hand, and if you do, special summon the monster that was destroyed and sent to the grave by this effect on the field, but negate its effects, which is basically just going to give you a monster out of your opponent's graveyard, which is really good to be able to negate and destroy and then take control of that monster directly from the graveyard, especially if we negate something that's really large. We can basically just take it for ourselves. We then play 3 copies of Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike is really good at handling your opponent's monster effects and handling the monsters that your opponent special summons. We then also play 3 copies of Solemn Warning. Solemn Warning is definitely a 3-of as well in the deck for counter fairies to basically just stop your opponent's plays alongside our 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. We basically have an answer to everything in this deck with this lineup to basically just stop our opponent's battle phase and then stop anything else we need to with our Solemn Brigade and our copy of our Draco Utopian Aura, which is just really good to be able to play in this build. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to start off with Avenging Knight Parashaft. This card is great to be able to summon off of our counter trap, and just an awesome boss monster that's really easy to summon out to your side of the field with the counter trap. The reason we're playing this card at 3 is because we are playing Extravagance, so you're going to see a lot of 3-ofs in the extract, but this card is really cool because once per turn you can change the battle position of a face-up monster opponent controls, and during the battle, basically this card inflicts piercing damage to your opponent, which is a great ability to be able to use with this card to help you go in for game. We then play 3 copies of Utopia. Utopia is definitely a 3-of in the build, so we can step into our copy of Utopia the Lightning to give us a 5,000 attack point boss monster on our side of the field, so we can basically swing in, as when you do battle with this card, you can actually make this card go up to 5,000, which is a great effect. Plus this card is light, so it's very easy to summon to our side of the field, especially if we do have the barrier statue on the field. We then play 2 2 copies of Bagooska just in case we need to slow down the game. This card is just a really good option to be able to play in the deck, and I really like this card overall. We then play a single copy of Typhon. Typhon's just a great option in the deck overall, but I feel like you only need a single copy of this card, even though we can banish it with Extravagance. If we're going second, we're just going to summon this card anyways, so it's really just a great one-of in the build. We then play 2 copies of Celestial Night Lord Parashap. This card is really good as a 2 in the deck. You could probably play 3 copies of it, but I feel like 2 is really all you need. This card is a great effect that you can discard a card to add the Sanctuary Sky or a card that specifically lists Sanctuary Sky and its text from your deck to your hand, or the Sanctuary Sky is on the field, you're going to a fairy monster instead. And if another face-up fairy monster you control is sent to the grave, you can banish a fairy monster from your grave to special summon a fairy from your hand, whose level is higher than the banished monsters, which is a pretty cool ability to be able to use. But this card is great in the deck as a 2/0 to help you get to your Sanctum, which is really nice. We then play a single copy of Protector of the Agent's Moon. This card is a great one-of in the deck because this card has the ability that you contribute a fairy monster, target a card your opponent controls, and destroy it, which is a great effect to be able to pop a card in the field. And this card is light, so you can summon it under the Barrier Statue. The only card you can't summon under Barrier Statue is the copy of Bagooska and the copy of Typhon, which is why I'm just playing 2 in 1 of these cards. So, that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. This deck is super fun to be able to play. If you guys have never played Counter Fairy before, you should definitely give this deck a try. It's really fun to be able to play, to basically just say no to everything your opponent does and have an answer to everything. It's absolutely crazy how you don't even have to pay life points or discard cards for your copy of Guardian Ariadne, which is just really nice to be able to do. So, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.